I mix what I like, what I like, what I like. Hey, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like Live. Again, I'm Jared Ball, your host, and of course, happy to be here. Please, again, go to imixwhatilike.org and make sure you're subscribed and signed up there so you don't miss any of the variety of things I and my colleagues are involved in and producing across multimedia. You don't want to miss any of that. And of course, at I Mix What I Like for all of your social media as well. I know we have a big show, a lot of excitement around, of course, our guests coming up and well-deserved. But before we do get there, please just let me remind you, of course, to consider not only liking, sharing, and subscribing here, but becoming also a member as we look to build something I'll be hopefully announcing very soon, and or at least showing some sort of support for political prisoners and those working on their behalf. So either way, you're not contributing anything to any, me as an individual, anything like that. I don't want to be confused with a lot of what else happens on these platforms, but we're trying to build something that would require some support. And if you can, please consider doing that. And know that it's going to something, for a greater collective beyond this. Similarly, speaking of collectives, I was asked about this not long ago, and we happily announce that the Blacklash, the Africana Collective, is coming back in full effect. And in fact, as you see here, and is announced and can be found at imixwhatilike.org as well, we're going to be having a post-election purple haze democracy and its discontents conversation on the 20th of this month. Again, the link and all of that can be found at imixwhatilike.org, and you can join some of the Blacklash Collective, many of whom you've seen here on this platform individually over the last couple of weeks. All right, so let's get to our obviously to our guest, who many of you already know and would have read at least some of his many works. And that, of course, is Dr. Gerald Horne, who holds the Moores Professorship of History and African American Studies at the University of Houston. His research has addressed issues of racism in a variety of relations involving labor, politics, civil rights, international relations, and war. He has also written extensively about the film industry, which I've found personally very interesting and exciting as well for my own professional work. And his latest of more than 30 books is The Dawning of the Apocalypse, The Roots of Slavery, White Supremacy, Settler Colonialism, and Capitalism in the Long 16th Century. So without further ado, Dr. Gerald Horne, thanks again for joining me and us, and good morning to you.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me.
So as we talked just briefly off the air, there's a lot of topics that I want to raise sort of broadly with you to indirectly bring a discussion and focus of all your work, which has been remarkable in its amount, production, and quality. But as we agreed, and as you said, you insisted, you wanted us to start with what went down last week on January 6th, described even in some mainstream presses as terrorism and insurgency. How have you been interpreting, or how would you like for us to consider interpreting what happened the other day or last week?
Well, I think it was very serious. I'm afraid to say some of our friends on the left have, coincidentally or not, I think downplayed the significance, speaking of it as a, quote, riot, unquote. That is to say, if college students in Fort Lauderdale throw a garbage can through the window of Starbucks, that's a riot. If Euro-American men, often armed with plastic handcuffs, after having built a noose on the Capitol grounds, invade the sanctum of the Capitol, after some have broadcast that they would like to put a bullet through the noggin of Nancy Pelosi and are hunting for congresspersons, James Clyburn, the senior Black member of the Democratic caucus, suggests that there might have been complicity by the Capitol Police because he has a hideaway in that building that somehow they found, even though the office that he has with his name on the door, they did not molest at all. Now, somehow that's a riot too. I think as a person whose name I do not respect once suggested this is defining deviancy down, so to speak. It's really sort of letting these insurrectionists and terrorists and seditionists off the hook. And I think it also ignores the details. That's the thing about these people in the United States. I mean, they have access to the internet and all sorts of sources. They don't seem to read that much. I mean, the Business Insider, which is a German publication, had an article just a few days ago based upon interviews with the peers of their security counterparts in the United States, suggesting that what took place on January 6th was not a security failure, but a failure of an attempt to prevent the transfer of power from Trump to Biden. I mean, obviously that's what it was. I mean, why else would people come out on January 6th? Why else would they be chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," for example? And it's very disturbing. It's almost as if some of our friends on the left, they just can't believe what they're seeing. They have a theory of the case. The theory of the case is that many of these folks that you saw invade the Capitol, they're actually social democrats in disguise. But somehow the Democratic Party does not do well by them, which may be true, but it denies these seditionists and invaders of agency. It's almost as if they don't know where they're going, and then they don't know history. I mean, the fact that the term settler colonialism is not the everyday vocabulary of people on the left, what does that mean? I mean, how do you think people like me and you got into North America? I mean, do we swim over? Were we voluntary migrants? I mean, this is lunacy. How was the land taken from the Native Americans? It was basically class collaboration between and amongst poorer and richer Europeans for their mutual benefit. And you just saw an expression of that at January 6th, but people can't digest that apparently. They can't comprehend it apparently. And so therefore they define it downward. It was a riot. And then try to critique those who say it was a failed insurrection or a failed coup d'etat. But we already know in the press reports just today that we're not out of the woods yet. That's one of the reasons why I want to talk about this immediately. January 17th, January 20th, January 17th, January 20th, there are going to be manifestations in 50 different capitals. There will probably be a return to Washington, D.C. Most of these folks who are basically letting the seditionists off the hook, they don't talk about what happened in Lansing, Michigan a few weeks ago when these militiamen were arrested after their plan was exposed, supposedly to invade the state capitol, blow it up in a made-for-TV extravaganza, and then as a sideline, kidnap the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, who had been in conflict with Agent Orange, Mr. 45, and execute her too. I guess that all of this is just too awesome. It's just too overwhelming. And so therefore, people who oftentimes pride themselves on their realism have, I'm afraid to say, retreated into a kind of panty-waisted idealism.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.